It started slowly. At first, AI code assistants were just a novelty, something you'd try out for fun or to speed up your documentation. I remember the first time I used GitHub Copilot. I was writing a basic REST API and without even asking, it started filling in entire function blocks, importing libraries, naming variables the way I usually did. At first I laughed. Then I blinked. Then I stopped typing and just watched it work. It was eerie. Not perfect, not always right, but eerily good. That was a year ago. Since then, the landscape has completely transformed. We've gone from autocomplete to autonomous co-developers. What once felt like a helpful nudge is now a full-blown sprint ahead of me. Claude Opus 4, for instance, doesn't just suggest lines of code. It digests entire projects and writes modules that used to take me hours, even days. Google's Jules works asynchronously, meaning it can continue thinking and coding while I grab a coffee or shift to another task. It's no longer just assisting. It's replacing the mechanical part of what I used to call work. The speed of this evolution is something that even seasoned devs weren't fully prepared for. One day, you're the expert in the room. The next, you're the bottleneck. Too slow, too reliant on habit, too human. That's a weird realization to sit with. We've always celebrated our creativity and problem-solving skills as developers. But what happens when the machine not only understands syntax and structure, but starts to get better at the creative parts too? These AI systems don't get tired. They don't overlook edge cases. They don't get distracted by Slack messages or feel the pressure of a sprint deadline. They just work. Constantly. Tirelessly. And in many cases, more reliably than humans. That's what makes this shift feel so monumental. It's not just about speed. It's about quality, consistency, and adaptability at scale. You give the AI a clear prompt and it delivers something that would pass code review. Sometimes it even writes the code you would have written, only faster. And here's the kicker. It learns from you. The more you use it, the more it adapts to your style, your naming conventions, your quirks. It's not just a tool, it becomes a version of you that's optimized, efficient, on demand, which begs the uncomfortable question: if the AI writes like me, thinks like me, and performs faster than me, what's my role in this equation? This is where the conversation starts to shift from technology to humanity. Because this isn't just about new software, it's about identity. For many of us, coding wasn't just a skill. It was who we were. It defined our value. We were problem solvers, builders, creators. But now we're being asked to redefine that role, and fast. Developers everywhere are realizing that we're not in the age of writing code anymore. We're in the age of prompting, curating, directing. Our new job isn't to construct every line from scratch, it's to ask the right questions and understand the answers. To see what the AI can't see, the context, the ethics, the long-term vision. And don't get me wrong, this isn't doom and gloom. It's a shift. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it forces you to adapt. But it also opens up possibilities we never had before. Small teams can now ship like large ones. Solo devs can prototype entire platforms in a weekend. Entrepreneurs without a tech background can build functioning apps by describing their idea. In plain English, the technology is democratizing development, but it's also raising the bar. The best coders aren't the ones who type the fastest anymore. They're the ones who can think the clearest, articulate problems the best, and guide AI to meaningful outcomes. That's the world we're in now. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. And if you're still treating AI code assistants like a shortcut or a gimmick, you're already behind. The moment it truly hit me that this wasn't just a tool but a turning point was during a late-night project sprint. I was up, running on caffeine and deadlines, pushing code for a client app. The pressure was on. Deadlines don't care if you're tired or blocked. I remember opening my editor and just staring at the blank function I needed to write. It was simple stuff: user authentication, email verification, a couple of logic checks. Normally I would have groaned and dived in, but this time something stopped me. I typed a few words: user login with JWT and email check, and just waited. In under 10 seconds, Copilot had written the skeleton. Another line, a slight tweak, and boom, working code. I tested it. It passed. I blinked again. That whole process, which would have taken me maybe half an hour with full focus, was over in 3 minutes. 3. And not just the boilerplate, it added useful comments, followed my project structure, and anticipated what I'd need next. I didn't feel like I'd written code. I felt like I'd overseen it. And then it just kept happening. Every time I sat down to code, I found myself doing less of the heavy lifting. I was guiding, correcting, fine-tuning. The AI didn't replace me with a single dramatic sweep. It happened, slowly, invisibly, line by line, task by task. First, it wrote the tedious stuff, basic functions, repetitive logic, tests. Then it started completing logic chains before I could even articulate them. Eventually, I realized I was spending most of my time reading its suggestions, nodding and hitting accept. That shift felt weird at first, like cheating. But then I asked myself, what exactly is cheating here? If I'm still getting the job done, if I'm delivering on time, if the output is solid, am I really cheating or just evolving? Of course, not everything was seamless. There were mistakes. Sometimes the AI misunderstood the problem or hallucinated APIs that didn't exist. But that's the thing. It made mistakes like a junior developer would. And I had to treat it the same way. Patiently, critically, and constructively. It became part of my workflow, not an interruption to it. And I started noticing the emotional shift. That quiet panic you feel when you're stuck on a bug for too long, that started fading. The stress of having to write perfect code on the first try, gone. I was thinking more clearly, moving faster, and paradoxically, I was enjoying coding more. Not because I was writing it, but because I was orchestrating it, like a conductor instead of a musician. At some point, I stepped back and looked at my week. I realized I'd written maybe 30% of the code manually. The rest was prompted, reviewed, and modified. That's when it hit me. I wasn't the coder anymore. I was the reviewer, the decision maker, the architect. And I hadn't planned this. I hadn't applied for a new title. It just happened. My job wasn't about syntax and loops anymore. It was about intent, context, making sure the AI understood the problem, and then stepping in when it didn't. In a way, I'd become a bridge between raw ideas and working code. Not the hammer, not the nail, but the blueprint. And here's what no one tells you about that shift. It's uncomfortable. We spend years perfecting our craft, getting good at the grind. We learn to wear long hours like a badge of honor. Then this tool walks in, skips the grind, and produces decent code in seconds. It shakes your sense of worth. If I'm not typing all day, am I even contributing? If the AI can do in 1 minute what used to take me an hour, what's my value? I wrestled with those questions. A lot. But eventually, I found a strange kind of freedom in letting go. It wasn't about replacing what I do. It was about redefining how I do it. The real value, it turns out, wasn't in the code itself. It was in understanding the system, managing complexity, and anticipating edge cases before they happened. AI didn't take that from me. If anything, it made it more important. The truth is, once I leaned into that change, I started producing more and better work. I began tackling features I would have avoided before. The time saved on low-level coding gave me breathing room to think bigger, test better, and even experiment. It made me faster, yes, but also bolder. People often say AI is coming for our jobs. But what I experienced wasn't a job loss. It was a job shift. The keyboard didn't leave my hands, but what I typed changed. The responsibility changed. The role evolved, and the more I worked with AI, the more I realized the future isn't about writing perfect code. It's about knowing what to build and guiding the machine to build it well. I didn't lose my job to AI, I just stopped doing the part of it that slowed me down. When people talk about AI replacing jobs, the conversation usually jumps straight to economics, salary cuts, layoffs, automation wiping out whole departments. But what hit me the hardest wasn't the paycheck or the task list. It was the identity crisis. For years, coding wasn't just something I did, it was who I was. It was how I introduced myself at parties, how I measured my own value, how I justified the long nights and short weekends. I was proud of it, of the grind, of the fluency in languages that most people found unreadable, of building things from nothing. And then, piece by piece, AI started doing it better. At first, I shrugged it off. I told myself it was just a tool, like a calculator or a search engine, useful, but not defining. But as the weeks went by, I noticed something I hadn't expected, a hollow feeling. When I pushed a feature and realized I had only written 20% of the code myself, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt disconnected. I wasn't proud of that feature. I didn't feel like I'd earned it. There's this weird emotional bond that forms when you debug something for 3 hours and finally make it work. It's frustrating, but it's also deeply human. There's a sense of conquest. You outsmarted the machine. But now, the machine is the problem solver. It's the one suggesting where the error might be, writing better tests, offering cleaner logic. You're just the referee, deciding which solution to keep. It made me question everything. If I'm not solving problems, if I'm not writing the code, what exactly am I doing here? Am I still a developer, or just someone babysitting? An algorithm? Those thoughts crept in at odd hours, during meetings, while sipping coffee. I didn't say them out loud at first because I didn't know how to articulate them. It wasn't fear of being replaced, it was fear of being irrelevant. And yet, strangely, amid all that emotional chaos, something shifted. The more I let go of the need to own every line of code, the more I started seeing the bigger picture. I wasn't getting slower, I was getting faster. I wasn't becoming obsolete, I was becoming strategic. I began to realize that the real value wasn't in the syntax, it was in the vision, in understanding why we were building something, who it was for, what problem it solved. That's where the emotional healing started. When I looked around, I saw that the teams thriving with AI weren't the ones clinging to old workflows. They were the ones redefining roles, the ones treating AI not as a rival but as a new kind of colleague, one who doesn't sleep, doesn't miss deadlines, and never needs coffee breaks. I stopped trying to outcode the AI. I started trying to outthink it. And that shift brought me back to something deeper than code, creativity. I had more time now, more space. I wasn't stuck in loops and logic. I could explore product ideas, test wild features, focus on the user. I started talking more to designers, marketers, even customers because I had the bandwidth. The AI had given me back the one thing developers never have enough of: time. The economic part, of course, still mattered. We can't ignore the financial ripple effects of automation. Junior dev roles are evolving fast. Companies are realizing they can ship MVPs with a fraction of the team size. Freelancers who used to charge by the hour are now facing clients who expect 3 hours of work in 30 minutes. It's real. It's happening. But alongside that, new roles are being born. I've seen job titles like AI prompt engineer, AI workflow strategist, and machine collaboration lead pop up in job boards. These aren't fluffy titles. They reflect a real need for people who know how to guide these systems, who understand not just what to build, but how to communicate it to the AI effectively. The truth is, we're in a weird in-between moment. One foot in the old world of manual control, the other stepping into this new space where AI does the heavy lifting. And yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it's also exciting. We're not being pushed out, we're being pushed up. Higher level thinking, more creative control, more strategic input. And let's be honest, less time spent writing boilerplate CRUD operations. I think back to that first time I felt replaced, sitting there staring at AI-written code that looked just like mine. It rattled me. But now I realize it wasn't a threat, it was a mirror. It showed me how much of my job had become routine, predictable, even mechanical. And it asked me, gently but firmly, what else can you be? That question changed everything. Now, it's probably clear this isn't just about a tool upgrade. It's not like switching from Notepad to VS Code or learning a new language like Rust or Go. This change, what we're living through right now, is something deeper. It's a full shift in how we create, in how we work, and maybe even in how we think. And as strange as it sounds, I don't think most people truly grasp just how early we still are. What we're seeing with AI right now, code assistants, rendering engines, text-to-audio generators, it's the equivalent of dial-up internet. In the 90s, you can already feel the potential, but we haven't scratched the surface. The systems we use today are impressive, but they're still rough, still clunky in places. You have to phrase things a certain way. You have to prompt carefully. You need to babysit the output. But the trajectory is unmistakable. These systems are evolving at a rate that's hard to wrap your head around. Every update feels like a leap. And we're not talking 5 years from now, I mean next quarter. What happens when these models start integrating seamlessly into IDEs, CI/CD pipelines, cloud deployment tools, and design systems? What happens when a single voice prompt can spin up a production-ready scalable app, complete with front-end, back-end tests, docs, and deployment scripts, all tuned to your brand, your stack, your preferences? We're heading toward a world where the barrier between idea and execution becomes paper-thin, where creativity and technical execution merge, where not knowing how to code won't be a limitation, it'll be a starting point. Because the system will do the coding, your job will be to imagine something worth building. And sure, that sounds dramatic, but look at what's already happening. People with zero engineering background are building tools, products, even startups, just by explaining what they want. Meanwhile, seasoned engineers are using AI to scale like teams twice their size. Solo creators are doing what once required agencies. This isn't replacing creativity, it's turbocharging it. Think about that for a second. Think about a designer who can build their own prototype without a dev team. A teacher who can spin up an interactive learning tool tailored to their students. A nonprofit that can automate their donation portal without hiring a single engineer. That's the power of this new era. It's not about taking jobs away, it's about redistributing creation, leveling the field, amplifying voices. But with that power comes something else: responsibility. When things move this fast, ethics matter more than ever. Just because you can build something doesn't mean you should. Just because the AI says it's right doesn't mean it is. So our roles as developers, creators, technologists, they're not shrinking. They're expanding. We're becoming curators of the future. The ones who don't just push buttons but ask the hard questions. What are we building? Why does it matter? Who does it serve? What happens if we get it wrong? And that's the beautiful irony. The more powerful the AI becomes, the more important our human judgment becomes, not less. More. People often ask, aren't you scared? Doesn't this threaten your career? And I get it, that fear is real, but honestly, I'm not scared, I'm awake, I'm more aware than I've ever been. Because now the ceiling is higher, the walls are wider. We can do more, faster, better, smarter. And that's not a threat. That's a challenge to grow, to adapt, to lead. The coders, creators, and thinkers who'll thrive in this new world aren't the ones clinging to the past. They're the ones asking, what else can I do now that I couldn't do before? They're not just writing code, they're rewriting roles, reshaping industries, redefining what's possible. That's what makes this moment so electrifying. We're not at the end of a job, we're at the beginning of a new one that's faster paced, more collaborative, more imaginative. The ones who embrace that won't just survive, they'll soar. And if you're still asking whether this is a temporary phase or a passing trend, you're missing the point entirely. This isn't just the future of coding. It's the future of creating.